Hello and welcome to another episode of the Testing Peers. We have the full band here tonight. So I'm joined with Russell.
Hello.
Chris.
Hey.
David.
Hi.
And I'm Simon. Tonight we're going to be talking about the wonderful subject of certifications and the value we feel they bring. Just before we start, a quick thank you to our sponsor. This podcast is kindly sponsored by Saffron QA. Saffron QA are a provider of recruitment and consultancy services exclusively for the software testing industry. More details can be found in the show notes. Russell, what are we starting off with?
Yeah, so the topic made me think back to my youth certification and qualifications and things like that. So I was thinking back to a time long ago now when I was at school, before computers, that sort of time frame. It made me think about overachievement, so qualifications and things like that. So I remember back to school and I thought, there's a certain thing I did much better than I should have ever done on. So I got I think a B in English. Now, anyone's ever read anything I've written or ever been involved with my listening to me speak or anything else will know my English is not a strength. So I was wanting to ask the peers, certainly I'm going to start with you, Simon. Is there anything you can remember back to qualification-wise, experience-wise, where you've overachieved it? What was it? I
think at school, for me, it was languages. I couldn't speak a word of them now, but I managed to come out with an A in German and I think it was an A in Latin as well. I did Latin GCSE and I got an A in it. I enjoyed it, to be fair, but it's not something I've ever had any use out of since, really. I can't really think of anything else I did that would be classed as overachieving, really.
Chris, how about you, sir?
Overachieving. It's an interesting one. I mean, I'll be honest with you. For my GCSEs, I didn't do a single minute of revision. I completed GoldenEye on every single level of difficulty possible. And so I vastly underachieved. I was predicted 10 A stars and I didn't get one. So that's not a great sign. The highlight, I think, was probably I did graphic design, which I didn't do a day of work for my coursework. And I got a G+ for my coursework, which I think you'll all agree is a great deal of underachievement. If anyone's looking for graphic design, don't please talk to me.
That, kids, is why you need to do your revision for your exam.
This is why, in all honesty, with my boys, I'm happy to help them with schoolwork and stuff. Like I found school not particularly hard. It was just, I just didn't apply myself. Well, unfortunately, my wife is incredibly disciplined. In the year that she was doing her finals at university, she planned our wedding and completed all of her work on time and still got a 2-1 degree. And she beat all the deadlines of her housemates who were all also teachers. It was just, she's got that super discipline. So as long as we can sort of balance the fact that I'm all right at sort of learning things and talking about things with people, and she was great with the hot on the discipline for revision and coursework. And, when people did revision timetables, those things.
Spend more time doing revision timetables than revision tests.
I just read the cheat sheets for computer games.
Okay, so Chris isn't our biggest overachiever then. I'm sure you've achieved something more than people expected at some point.
I mean, I got the gymnastics medals. I mean, they were pretty cool.
There you go.
I'm similar to Chris, really. I didn't really apply myself at GCSEs. I got fairly good grades. I wouldn't say that there's anything that I overachieved at. I just did okay. And I think that's been almost the story of my life, is that I've just got through by the skin of my teeth. Probably my pleasing thing, I wouldn't say I overachieved, but I did achieve a pass in CDT, so in my woodwork, and I designed something stupid and still got a grade for it. So perhaps that's my overachievement, coming up with some stupid idea and getting a grade for it.
It's not the idea that they reward, it's the effort you put in. Maybe. That takes us nicely on to, I guess, certification and their value. So we just talked a little bit about qualifications and studying and things like that. What do we think the value is in testing qualifications and certifications?
I'm going to just jump in quickly and say this does genuinely start with it depends on the context. The first testing job I ever got outside of the computer games industry, and the first time I was looking for jobs outside the computer games industry, it was full of qualifications as like the barrier to entry for these things. And I was terrified of even applying for jobs without at least saying I have every intention of getting an ISEB. And in that case, I felt like that was something that I had to do. And it was only sort of sheer lack of conversing with people at a job fair that I got in and eventually ended up with an ISTQB down the line. So context is really important, and perception.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, when I got my first job, even before I became a developer, I did this graduate scheme at my first role. And within the testing 2-month period I had, the first thing they did before I even was allowed to touch anything, and that was working on appliances, so it's hardware testing as well as software testing. Before I touched anything, they sent me on the ISTQB. So the first knowledge I had of testing was the ISTQB for that role, and I didn't even have a chance to think about it. You say, I don't want to do that. It was just do this. So it was just given to me. But I've seen varying levels of value over the years of people who have achieved the qualification. I use achieved as a loose term. It's one that baffles me when the most obvious one is ISTQB. There are others, and I'm sure we'll touch on some of the others as well. But anything that's multiple choice based, that isn't actually practically hands-on doing stuff, then I feel it has a limited value in the actual workplace to say that you're a certified tester because you filled in a multiple choice. I feel that doesn't really add a huge amount of value to what you're bringing. What's more important is you've gained that knowledge and you've gone away and learned further on those topics. I
think sometimes, it depends on the context, but sometimes for some people, and it depends on the person, it can reinforce what they've learned. Sometimes with these certifications, they can be in testing for a time and then it proves what they understand and enhances their knowledge of how it is. The difficulty is that sometimes the theory, as even with degrees and stuff, doesn't always correspond to what happens in the workplace. So exactly as you say, Simon, to answer the multi-choice, you have to remember what the actual syllabus actually said, make sure you write it. And then as soon as you get back to work, you forget it all because actually it's not relevant in your place of work.
Yeah.
For me personally, I took the ISTQB and I financed it myself because I had just been made redundant or was just about to be made redundant. And I felt at that time that I was going into more of a testing role and I needed that qualification. I had the intention of staying in testing for a time. And so therefore that I felt at the time, and it was many years ago, gave me the gravitas to go, look, I'm committed to testing because I've got this qualification. And that's why I did it at that particular time.
I think that echoes something with me, I guess, because it's like Chris says, the context is like what David said there. It's qualifications, certifications can give you confidence. It can get you a foot in the door. It can show you're serious about a subject area. But the consequence as well is a week course or a week's worth of training in order to pass an exam isn't going to embed realms and realms of information or knowledge. There's nothing that you can take a week to do. You can't learn a language in a week. You can't do something in a week. It's a foot in the door. It's a starting point. And I think that leads into Simon's point. It's a start to get you interested to go and look further. It touches on the subject. It brings up a library of information and awareness. That means you can speak in a common way quite often in that subject area, but it doesn't make you generally an expert. It takes a lot more than a week to go an expert at anything. But to have, and often this foundation that we talk about with ISTQB, it does give you a base level of information. And
it's a glossary, isn't it, basically? Yeah.
Yeah, in that particular example, definitely.
But it goes back to what Simon was saying in the intro or the banter, is that we can do these certifications, and if we don't practice them, then actually it becomes old knowledge, a bit like your Latin and your languages. Just because you've got the qualification doesn't mean to say that it's useful in your career 10 years down the line, unless you actually practice it and maintain it.
Do we list them in our CVs and stuff? Do you actually, on your own personal CV, do you even list that you've got ISTQB at this point?
Yes,
I do.
Yes,
I do. But I focus more on the advanced test manager one that I've got rather than the foundation.
Honestly, the answer why I include it is because some jobs have it in the specification.
Yeah.
Personally, I avoid putting it in job adverts.
I do not have it in mine.
So I don't think it's a necessity to have it in a job advert. Again, it depends on the context and depends on the company they're working for. But in terms of diversity, and as we were talking about make a tester, we shouldn't necessarily cut out people who have a great potential in testing just because they haven't got it.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be a criteria just to get the job. We can support them if they choose to do it when they actually join us, but it shouldn't be the blanket level, or they have to have the foundation level of ISTQB.
Agreed. And I think it's definitely something that I wouldn't say it's a must-have. I agree with you that it's something that I wouldn't discount someone if they had it. I wouldn't necessarily always look favorably on someone because they have it either, but it's something that's okay. So like we said earlier, it shows they've got an interest in the area. It shows they want to learn more. What I struggle with, it's something I've said before in other things around this, is I struggle with people that hold it as a badge of honor, and they either put it in their LinkedIn title ISTQB certified tester or something like that, I feel that gives the wrong message. Just because you've passed a multiple choice exam does not make you a great tester. You need to be able to apply that and prove yourself in other ways and learn more above and beyond the syllabus.
But equally, I don't think that people should criticize people if they've chosen to do it.
No, absolutely not. I've encouraged people in the past to go and do it to solidify their knowledge. Yeah. I certainly wouldn't push people away from it, but I wouldn't say hold it up as a badge of honor that you've done everything you need to do to become a tester.
Yeah, I'm like Simon in the sense that I would actually generally encourage new people in testing that I bring on board into the companies I've worked in to do the course. I think it helps them, it gives them some confidence, it gives them something if they're looking for a job elsewhere in life that might help them. Might not, probably won't, but might. I think it's good to have it. I don't think it's a necessity or a good thing, but the badge of honor, it isn't necessarily that. The fact that it's multiple choice, I don't really mind too much. It depends on the pass rates of these things. If it's got 95% pass rate, then it means something very different to a multiple choice with a 2% pass rate.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it's like most things, Chris said, context. There's so many people with these things, they don't mean that much and no one has knowledge of what they are, and there's different versions of different courses that you can do. I honestly I had to do a bit of Googling to find out what sort of courses are out there at the moment because I've no idea. I've not looked in 5 to 6 years. And know of the ISTQB. ISEB died, I think, name-wise a while ago. And the sort of family that exists around it, that's all I kind of knew about because I've not looked at CVs or cared or read in any depth or researched if I've seen a CV with them in because it wasn't important. I value the experiences generally 9 times out of 10 over any mention, which is Chris's point, I guess, about not having it on CVs. It hasn't added much value for the people I've been looking at jobs. I wouldn't judge them being better because they've got a certification.
I would say just on the badge of honor thing, for some people, it's an almighty achievement to actually get these things. And again, it's the context of the person and how it is they're wearing it as a badge of honor. Because for some people, passing an exam of any description is a massive achievement. True. And I know for me, like multiple choice exams, they are what they are. You pick one of 4. But some of those questions, like you thought, well, 2 or 3 of these ones could be the answer. So, it was one of those things. Like I've known people who failed it and then passed at a later date, who saw it as a great triumph. I'm pretty sure they wouldn't lead in conversations going, well, did you know that I've got a ISTQB foundation? But, to say that they've got that and to put that front and center on their CV is fine. This is a context for what we're looking for, more broadly speaking, in people if they were going to be carrying these things on them. Like I've got my certificate attached to my LinkedIn profile if anyone ever wanted to find out what my number was to say that I'd done it. It's just a thing. The broader, higher up level ones that we talk about, they require you to do more sort of coursework, written stuff, don't they, Simon?
The advanced test manager wasn't. It was just it was a 3-hour exam, but it was mainly multiple choice, I think. But there was a few that were more written answers as well. But if you look at courses like the black box software testing ones, they're not particularly certifications, but they are courses where you do have to do weeks of lectures, weeks of coursework. You have a small group of people that you need to interact with, and it's all practical based on actual testing. So whether it's bug advocacy or whether it's writing test reports or what exploratory testing or what have you, courses where you have a practical element, whether it be some level of coursework, just provides that better confidence that they have the ability to do the job. On the ISTQB, I had someone in my team that I was working with that was really he had a desperate want to be a tester, but he didn't have the aptitude to really make it work. And I tried, coaching him, bringing him, but he just wasn't getting it. My boss at the time said, send him on ISTQB, and if he fails it, we have an excuse to put it as part of his performance plan that he's not succeeding. And I really, really, really wanted him to pass. And he failed twice. And it was that one thing that it was used as a measuring stick of whether he actually could achieve anything within the testing world, which I felt really bad that it was done in that way. And, it wasn't my decision to do it that way, but it was used as a measuring stick, which was unfortunate. But it isn't, as you say, Chris, just because it's multiple choice doesn't make it easy. It means it's easy. It's not easy that people do pass it, people do fail it. But it just, for me, the value is definitely on using that as a base to then go away and learn more.
There's a question or a statement, I guess, I think it was Martin Fowler that said, if certification doesn't correlate to competence. What's the value in certification?
That's true. Yeah.
And we've said some of the reasons for the value. It's confidence. It's, it's those things. It's foot in the door. If a certificate doesn't make you actually better at doing the job, you've got to really ask the value proposition from it. As long as there is a reason, I think going back to the context we're talking about, there is value. That value may not be to a prospective employer. It might be to you as an individual. You might learn some of the subject area. You might grow as an individual. It might trigger a passion. I've done a lot of non-testing related training courses in my time on, prints, ITILs, and all these things out there. It's been useful. It's given me knowledge that I wouldn't have had without it. But it hasn't made me an expert at print. It hasn't made me an expert in ITIL. But I've gotten better insight into those worlds. And someone did that who wasn't in testing, did a foundation in software testing. That helped give them some context. It probably would be better. But yeah, does it make you a great tester? Does it make me great at doing ITIL or prints? No. But it can give you some useful information that can help.
In some regulatory environments, it is a mandate that every tester in the team has to have the ISTQB foundation.
I've had that with customers demanding that everyone working on their things has got the qualifications. Yeah.
So I was going to say about Chris saying about it's a big achievement. I think that it can be, because especially people sort of fall into testing and they might not necessarily have come straight out of university. So there might be a big gap between having taken exams and actually then the sort of stress of taking those exams. So to a certain extent, multi-choice is beneficial for them, because actually writing for 3 hours can really cause cramp because people aren't used to it anymore. Also, in the context of the multi-choice, they're not quite like the GCSE multi-choices. They do have a bit more thought process with it, but I do agree that it's not applied. And I do think that applying what you learn is important. And what do people think about putting potentially developers on these qualifications to get a better understanding of test? Because we've tried that with a couple of our developers and they have benefited from it because they appreciate much more. There's the other thing of actually what the certifications actually can do is give you ideas. They may not necessarily all be relevant, but as we've said before on going to conferences and things like that, they can open our eyes to new ideas or new ways of doing things that we can perhaps include in our day-to-day jobs.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We did that before, especially when we had in-house courses where an ISTQB instructor came on site to do the training. We would fill the spaces with developers that wanted to do it alongside it, and they found value out of it because they started to understand some of the concepts of testing and how it could help them to understand that more. I think you're right. I think it definitely can be used to help broaden the knowledge and understanding within the team.
I concur. But I haven't done it before. But I mean, I think generally speaking, I think the important thing is not specifically what the qualification is that you are looking at. Like, it doesn't have to be ISTQB. It needs to be something that gets everybody's minds in the same space. So like get everyone on the same page. So like we've done whole team agile training before. We've done whole team failure mode effects and analysis training before.
Catchy.
It's FMEA. I recommend it to you and your friends. Those things that get you all on the same page so you all understand the same context and the same language can be really important, rather than just one person going away, coming back with all these things and everyone else kind of being a bit confused or not listening to them. I think I do appreciate that the same language being used and the same understanding. I don't like the idea when people feel that it has to be applied as if it were gospel.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah. And I think sometimes those sorts of ideas get taken as gospel. Like I was in an agile training session where the automation triangle, the test pyramid, whatever the hell we're calling it, where that thing was brought out as the way that you have to approach testing. And that there's unit tests, there was BDD, which they were calling gherkins because apparently they thought it was the exact same thing. And then UI testing at the top and a little triangle for exploratory testing.
Was that a bubble? A cloud?
Triangles, bubbles, little at the top. And in that sense, that is someone who wasn't a practicing tester, who doesn't understand the context of us, who started to say, this is how you have to do it. And I don't believe there is a copy and paste method for any of these things for everybody. I think you need to apply it into your context, find what works for you and make that work for you and iterate on that as you go forwards. And so try and fail, like send someone on a course, maybe a trial or something, and see how they get on with it. If they come back and say it's a load of rubbish, maybe see if there's other stuff. And so we've talked a lot about ISTQB, but have we got other testing courses or certifications that we've heard of or seen or experienced that we think are worth looking at? You mentioned BBST earlier.
Yeah.
That's a thing that quite a few well-known people in the testing world, I think Kem Kaner, Murrett, whose surname I sadly can't pronounce, they're sort of amongst those things that are quite interesting. I've got a Rimgun card deck from BBST that I picked up at a conference that's kind of cool. There's a bunch of cool things I've seen on their website. I've not yet invested myself in those, but they seem to have some things that feel like they're a bit more applicable to everyday testing. For me, there was the rapid software testing course that a bunch of well-known testers have run. There's the automation in testing stuff that I think Richard and Mark from Ministry of Testing do.
And there is the Ministry of Testing Essentials as well, which they run, which is an intro into testing.
I think there's a lot of training on testing, which is really, really good, to your point, because training, I think, allows for the fact there's context. Certification normally means you have to pass to someone else's expectations, which is different because you then have to answer questions in a artificial context. But yeah, I think there are loads of trainings out there on security automation, on, I mentioned some project management, those sorts of things in this world that could be useful. Agile is a common one that we all get involved with these days.
Yeah, I think they're the big one that I remember being a big bang was Scrum Master, everyone doing the Scrum Master training. And at the time, my team was like, we'll just send someone on the Scrum Master course, then we'll have Agile nailed. They'll come back after a 2-day course and they'll be able to sort the whole Scrum process out. And it was a complete farce because you come back from that 2 days and what you're told on those 2 days is it's meant to be fluid, it's meant to be agile. No two teams will do it in the same way. You come back and your team's expecting you to run it by the book that you've learned on the course. And it's like, well, the course wasn't like that. But to Chris's point as well about the testing, when it's not run by a tester, the agile point of testing is very much that pyramid, and that is all you need to worry about for testing.
I've never seen anything explicitly on any agile websites, but it's certainly a popular.
No, it was in the presentation deck that I had for that course. Yeah.
We're going off a little bit on tangent because we're talking more about courses rather than certifications. So what do you think that certifications give that courses don't? And why should people take certification?
It's a paper.
Piece of paper.
Yeah.
It's a paper with a number on. I used to work for an awarding body once upon a time. That is literally what it is. Normally, it's recognized by another quality system that measures against certain criteria to say what level it is. But ultimately, that is what a qualification is. There's, I think, 7-tier level qualifications like degrees, GCSEs, until it gets measured against that. Now, I don't think many of these things are on those official standards or linked to those sort of qualification levels. So I don't think, honestly, it gives you much more than a piece of paper most of the time. That's useful. And again, it gives you more knowledge-wise, but it doesn't give you much more to come out of it other than a stamp. It does seem to give us CV templates for quite a few as well. I'm not going to that one in any more detail. I was going to tell you a story about ISTQB back in the day when I did it. So I was a sole tester in a team doing the course to learn what testing really was because I didn't have a clue. And I went and did that course and it told me what testing was. And it didn't look anything like what I was doing. Not a single bit like it at all. The tutor was relatively good at saying, look, this is, you've got to ignore what your world is. You've got to just learn the syllabus, ignore what the real world is, ignore where your work is. This is just what we're teaching you. You've got to do this.
Not a great setup, is it?
Well, that's why I guess I got frustrated by sort of qualifications and that ilk. Because it's like, well, that's great, but I can't relate it to my context, which means I'm going back, having learned some great words, but not being able to apply any of it. And I worked for a vocational qualification board at the time. So it was all about vocational qualifications, really more than it was this sort of stuff. And yeah, it knocked my confidence back rather than actually helping me be a better tester, because it made me think I was doing testing wrong. My imposter syndrome went off the chart because this was just all crazy stuff. I'm not doing any of this stuff. Qualifications can be useful, but you could also be thrown off kilt by them.
Yeah, and I've got a story on ISTQB, which is a bit of the reverse, actually, because when I did my ISTQB Advanced Test Manager, beforehand, I'd put the message out on social media that I was thinking about doing it, and you get this barrage of people saying, don't do it, it's not worth it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I made the decision that I was going to go ahead and do it. My company funded it for me, and actually, it was the best course I've been on. And one thing I will say is with these qualifications, if you do the course first, that usually has some benefit over just doing the exam. If you've got the material yourself, you sit yourself in a room, you read the book, you do the exam, you're not getting those tidbits of conversation that you might get from talking to others. You're not getting that experience of the person who's presenting and teaching you the course. And I had a really good instructor for this advanced test manager, and there was 3 of us on the course. So for a week, 5-day course, there was 3 of us and an instructor in a room. There was plenty of time for us to talk through our own context and ask questions on how it would apply to our own context. And actually, I came out of that week not just with a whole load of information from the course, but a whole load of ways that I could apply it into my own context. And I was able to go back and take stuff like risk management and whatever else into the workplace and actually make a difference. It was the first course and the only course I really felt that I've actually learned something and applied it. So for it to be one of the ones that's regarded as not valued generally in the industry, I think is something that's why I push back against it, saying it's not that it's a bad qualification. It just needs to be done in the right way and applied.
Is that the qualification though? Or is that the coaching, teaching method of the syllabus?
I think it was a mixture of the content was good. So the course content was actually useful, and the lecturer was very good at applying it to our contexts. And it was interesting because out of the 3, I was the only one in an agile methodology at work. The other 2 were talking very much about waterfall or V model type environment where there was lots of big suppliers and that kind of stuff. And that's not a world I'd been in at that point. I was very much in small scrum teams. And that was eye-opening to them, for me to be able to share agile stories, because they'd heard agile was this fast, disruptive, no discipline, muck everything up type process. Whereas, I was coming from a place where waterfall was slow and boring and wasn't going anywhere. And we were in this more modern world, and we were able to share stories and talk things through and work out the best bits of each and realize that it's all context based. And that was really useful, all part of the course. And I'm still in touch with the 2 people that I was on the course with. So it was a very, very productive course.
And here they are now. Sorry.
But it is an interesting conversation, and I really don't think there's a wrong answer or a right answer with these things, because I think it's a very personal thing, both for you, but also for where you're working. And I've had it in places where we've discussed about going for a certification or attending a conference. And in the times when I've had those choices, I've chosen the conferences because for me right now, in my own context, those conference attendances have benefited me more. And I think they benefited the organization in which I've been working. And I'm collecting them quite quickly at the moment, not intentionally. For me, I think it is important to note that there isn't a wrong or right answer, and getting a certification doesn't make you bad. Pursuing those things doesn't mean you're doing the wrong things. There's value in these things. Nothing's 100% correct. Mm-hmm. And I think it's worth having that conversation with people around you or peers and having a broader conversation. I don't think we should outright dismiss ISTQB and other things at all.
Agreed.
I think you have an open mind, have those discussions, try and work out what the value is for those things, do some reading and research on what's worthy and what's not really.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's about what works for you and what benefit you're going to get out of it, what benefit your team may get out of it as well. And it's what you feel comfortable doing and what you want to do, really, as long as you feel you're getting value out of it.
I think also it's not just a personal context as well. It's what the company might need, or like you say, the regulatory. Absolutely. They might need a certain amount of certification for whatever project or whatever. And so therefore you need to jump through the hoops in order to make sure that you can achieve that. But on a personal level, it is a personal journey. It's a personal choice. Companies can support that if they're in a position to do so, but we shouldn't discount and discredit people for choosing to do these particular things if they want to have that proof that they've actually done those particular things.
Certification has value. And what I would say is, don't be the company that says you can only do training if it has certification.
No.
Because as we just discussed, the difference between training and certification is a piece of paper.
It's the same thing as a degree or not a degree, isn't it? It's in some extent, some companies insist you have to have a bachelor's degree in some computer related topic to be able to go on and be a developer or be a tester in their company. And actually, we all know people that haven't gone that direct route, have fallen into testing through other means or fallen into development through other means. And actually, we shouldn't be disregarding them just because of their educational background. And the same goes with certifications or courses. Yeah. It doesn't make you a good or bad tester if you have or haven't got those qualifications.
If I'm honest, I would argue that the best testers and developers I've met are the ones that haven't done qualifications in it more often than not. But that's just my experience.
And this is also something we talked about on the Make a Tester thing, where actually trying to get all testers into a box by doing a tester's degree may not be the right thing. And it's the same really with these qualifications. If every tester had gone through and done all the ISTQB levels all the way up to advanced, we wouldn't have any differences in the workforce. And testing is all about being different and seeing things in a different way and finding those things that no one else has looked at.
Culture add, not culture fit.
Exactly.
So on that note, thank you very much for listening to the podcast. It's entirely up to you to take qualifications, find out suitable qualifications that you think might be beneficial to you and or your company, and good luck with them. So thank you very much for listening, and please do reach out to us on the regular social networks. So we have presence on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter and LinkedIn. Please look for Testing Peers. We also, on Patreon, we have a variety of different levels that you can help support us to produce these podcasts every fortnight. So please look for patreon.com/testingpeers. And also you can contact us via email at contactus@testingpeers.com. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll invite you back for another discussion in a week's time.
For now, it's goodbye from the Testing Peers.
Goodbye.